Good evening and welcome to the 29th episode of Leadership Conversations in the Development Sector. I am Anjali Patil, Associate Partner with Third Sector Partners. The social impact sector is full of passionate leaders with innovative outlooks on the world's greatest problems. Our leadership conversations focus on the unique insights offered by these leaders as they share their experiences and move the development sector forward. Our host, Go Barefoot, is an interactive web portal dedicated to the social sector. It brings together individuals, NGOs, NPOs, and the CSR arms of organizations with the mandate of creating a one-stop information website for both networking and knowledge sharing. We are supported by Catalyst, an NGO which has been preparing young women for leadership roles to create equality in opportunities and bridge the gender gap. Also, we are supported by Third Sector Partners, India's only executive search firm exclusively for the development sector. Our guest today is one of the leading lights in the development sector. I would like to extend a warm welcome to Kate Cochran, CEO, Upaya Social Ventures. Kate is a fierce believer that global poverty is not inevitable, and that entrepreneurialism is one of the sharpest tools to fight it. She's currently the CEO at Upaya Social Ventures, a nonprofit organization that accelerates and invests in early-stage companies that create lasting jobs for the poorest of the poor in India. Since 2011, Upaya has accelerated over 58 companies and invested in 32 companies that have created more than 25,000 lasting jobs for the extreme poor in India. Kate's previous roles include being a COO for Vitana, an organization creating student loan markets in developing countries, and a range of executive roles at Unitas, a microfinance accelerator. She's a frequent speaker on social entrepreneurship and the intersection of markets and mission at business schools and conferences. Kate holds a BA from Stanford University and an MPA from UCLA Anderson. In conversation with Kate is Shital Kakkar Mehra, leadership expert and executive presence coach for CEOs. Shital has trained over 75,000 professionals across Asia and has personally coached over 1,000 CXOs in the past 2 decades. She has conducted workshops for diverse organizations across Asia and has been invited as a speaker by leading B schools and professional associations. She is a best-selling author, and her latest best-selling book, Executive Presence: The Poise Formula for Leadership, is India's first research-based formula on leadership skills. Shital is also an active philanthropist and social entrepreneur. I hand over the stage to Shital to begin the interaction. Over to you, Shital.
Thank you, Anjali. Thank you. And welcome, Kate. We look forward to hearing your views. And, I'm going to start with my first question. What is the primary driver for your interest in impact investing? And there's a second part to the question, of course, which is how do you see it fitting into the larger portfolio of traditional investments as well as charitable activity?
Thank you. Before I begin, thank you so much for having me. This is a wonderful series that you're doing, and I'm honored to be included among it. But in terms of my driver and interest in impact investing, there are 2 anecdotes that come together to explain this. And the first goes all the way back to when I was in college. And like many college students, I was very, involved with different activities and very taken up. And they were very important to me. And I remember my senior year in college, it was actually around the same time of day. It's 5 a.m. where I am right now. And I had been up all night working on a bonfire, which was a big campus-wide event to get people excited about a football game. And I had been working very hard for days and days. And I was driving to the site and I stopped at a stoplight and I suddenly realized, if I'm going to work this hard in my life, it needs to be for something bigger than just getting a bunch of students excited about a football game. I know I'm going to be a workaholic. I want to put this to something that really matters. And that sort of started my career, my pathway toward a career that's been primarily in the NGO sector. But then I went to business school to get the skills that I thought that I needed in finance. And I often say a funny thing happened to me on my way through business school. I fell in love with business. I loved the discipline of it. I loved the different levers. And there was a clarity there that I hadn't seen in the NGO sector. And so these two sides of my drive came together, of having social impact on the problems that are facing us in the world, but using business discipline to have that impact. And I believe there's opportunity to have an outsized effect on these problems by bringing business discipline. So that's what drives me here. And impact investing, which I feel like I have been a part of for 20 years, because microfinance was really the early stages of learning that capital in the right way could have big impact on the poor. Not a panacea, not perfect, but even commercial, impact-friendly commercial capital was coming in much larger amounts than philanthropy could affect. And I think that was really the first test case for impact investing. And that was my introduction to this industry. And since then, as Anjali's introduction mentioned, I've worked in this space on student loans in education around the world, and now I have a very direct role and relationship to it with investing in companies that create jobs for the poor. And for me, it speaks to that discipline of business, but also it allows the philanthropy to go further, because we invest in a company, it does well, it pays us back, and we then invest in 2 more companies. So that's been
wonderful.
My journey.
Extremely inspiring, and so much of clarity of thought and self-awareness for a young person at that age and stage. That's very inspiring, I'm sure, for the young professionals who are listening to you right now. Okay, so I'm going to move on and ask you a question that after exiting an investment or concluding an engagement, what will success look like, both from the financial as well as, of course, the very critical social perspective for you?
Absolutely. I say to my team often that if we have massive financial success with a company, but the company wraps up and is no longer creating jobs or is closing jobs, then we have utterly failed. For us, the number one North Star metric is jobs created. And so to describe sort of a perfect scenario for us, I'll describe a company that we invested in 2015. They are based up in Assam. I'll actually be there next week. Tamil Plates is the company. Tambul is the corporate name, and we invested in them in 2015. They make arecanut leaf plates, and it wasn't a very large investment, but it was the size of investment they needed at that time, about $25,000. We were fortunate to co-invest with other like-minded investors at the time, like Rianta Capital. And in the last 7 years, they have gone through growth, and they have gone through setbacks like demonetization, which was very hard for them. COVID, of course, was very hard for so many small businesses, but they held on, and we were there with them. We actually introduced a whole new product for us of doing stabilization loans, which are repaid out of revenue, so that when revenue stopped during COVID, our companies, including Tamil Plates, didn't have to repay. And so we've ridden this roller coaster with them all 7 years, and they are back on their feet, and they are exporting to Australia and to the United States. And that attracted another investor this spring, and who wanted to make a large enough investment that they bought out our stake, and which we loved. We ended up getting a 2x return on that investment. But much more important, when we first met Tamil Plates, they had 300 people working for them. Today they have 3,000, and they're growing. And that's the perfect scenario for us.
Superb. So 2x in terms of revenue, but definitely your profit, but 10x in terms of job creation. And that's a phenomenal number. Now, we have a lot of professionals from the development sector. We have crossover candidate, professionals. We also have got people from the corporate sector who are in our audience right now. And they would love to hear from you. What are some of the trends which are emerging in the global impact market, or, how you see it in the next few years?
Yeah, I think, like any kind of emerging industry, the industry is getting more mature. What I'm beginning to see is there is much more nuance in investors' understanding of the role that they want to play in this space. I mentioned the microfinance era, and I think during that time, there were kind of these binaries. There were the investors who said, we're going to demonstrate that the market rates are possible, market rates of return, and we're not going to take less because we are here to demonstrate the viability of that. And then there are people saying, we're working with the poor, and this should be philanthropy, and there should be nothing. And there was, I think, tension there. What I've seen and really welcomed in, say, the last 5 years is a realization that there's a spectrum. Every impact investor finds what their blend of return and impact needs to be. And that with that clarity, there's acceptance that, for example, Upaya, we are impact first. We are proudly impact first. We do look for a return, but we accept that it can be sub-market because we are working with companies that have, that require a lot of patience. 10 years ago, it would have been, sort of a frowned upon thing for me to say that publicly. Now I see it's like, oh, you're that kind of investor. That's fine. There's certainly a lot of room, for impact investors who are also looking for market returns. The other big trend, and that I also welcome, is for many years, impact was defined by the investors however they wanted to define it, which of course makes it very hard to validate and verify. And there has been a lot of work within the industry to define frameworks and standards that industry players need to meet. Now, there's still work to do there, but it is moving in the right direction. Upaya has been kind of at the forefront of this. We've been collecting impact data since the beginning of our organization, but we come at it from the perspective that, if we don't collect our impact data to explain to our donors what we're doing, we think of it as R&D. Is the work actually having impact? And if it isn't, what are the changes we need to make? So we're welcoming the fact that we see much more hardcore impact data being collected.
Interesting you say that, because even at Catalyst, one of the co-hosts of this program, they measure impact all the time when it comes to, even submitting reports to donors, as well as, of course, for their own metrics, so that, they can get a better idea of what is impact in their area. So wonderful. Thanks so much. These look like very bright emerging trends. And I think next decade is going to be very interesting. Now, the pandemic, Kate, has changed everything. Attitudes towards making social impact, as well as, of course, has it in any way hardened your resolve for investing more in any ventures or any causes or environment or environmental impact? So what do you feel post the pandemic when it comes to impact investing?
Yeah, the pandemic has changed everything, and it has clarified hypotheses we've had or suspicions we've had in many ways. One thing that came into sharp focus for us in the first few months of the pandemic, and I'll go back to tumble plates as an example, we saw that the relationship that our job holders had with their enterprises protected them from the pandemic ways that micro entrepreneurs were not. You know, if you were on your own and all of a sudden commerce shuts down, there was nobody looking out for you. Whereas with tumble plates, even though revenue had stopped for the company, the CEO there went out to his job holders. He actually provided cash transfusions just to say, I want to make sure that you are okay. Nobody knows how long this is going to last. And there was sort of a safety net for being a part of an employed group as opposed to being a micro entrepreneur. So that really told us that we were on the right trail, that this notion of jobs and not aid was really had multiple effects. But the kinds of companies that we are investing in, we've just completed a strategic plan for the next 3 years. And for the past 5 years, we've had a commitment to having a gender balanced portfolio. We want half of our companies to be led or co-led by women. And we're doubling down on that commitment toward women. We are going to be looking at all of our impact data disaggregated by gender, because we have done that before, and we've seen that there are some income disparities, and we're going to dig deeper into that. But we are also particularly looking for companies that are employing more women than men, because we've seen that women are carrying, this isn't a new insight, but women carry so much of the household on their shoulders. And by employing women and giving them control of income, then it trickles down to the rest of the household. And so those are some of the changes we're making based on things that we observed during COVID. We also, on a positive note, we discovered that we can do a lot, like so many others, that we could do so much more virtually than we expected and then we thought. There's still no substitute for getting out into the field and seeing a company in action and meeting an entrepreneur there. We made 9 investments in 2020 and couldn't get on the ground for all of them. And I think that was an adaptation that worked fine for us then, but that we'd probably not want to continue.
Wonderful. The positive note was much needed. And yes, I'm going to switch gears and move to a question on talent. There is, of course, third sector partners at the senior level, and they do senior searches. And there's Go Barefoot, also one of the co-hosts. And they receive all the time queries from young professionals who would like to either enter the sector or switch over to another cause. So what is your advice to some of the young professionals who would like to be successful or have a fulfilling career in this sector?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. I think because my career has sort of spanned this gray zone between private and nonprofit sector, the social sector. And I think I surprise people sometimes by starting by saying it's wonderful to have passion. It is necessary to have passion. You also need hard skills. Find the way you want to express your passion. Find out what it takes to be successful there. The kind of work we're doing. It is, we attract people who, yes, are passionate about global poverty alleviation, but I also want to understand their finance skills. I appreciate if they have gone to school to learn those skills. This kind of work, the passion drives you through, sometimes challenging days, but it can't get you, through the day in, day out. Sometimes you just need to answer the question, what's the company valued at? For me, sitting in the United States, if somebody approaches me and they say they're very interested in international development, I say, find a way to spend time in the countries you're talking about. understand the context. It's not enough just to be excited about it. Find a way to get those hard skills.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I do believe that it starts at the grassroots level. Now, my final question to you is that please share with our audience 3 skills which are a must-have in this industry.
Great, and it's a lovely follow-up from the previous question. The first, I would say, for impact investing, the first skill that you really do have to have is financial analysis. And I'll say that I went to business school thinking I was working in the NGO sector, and I took a class called Financing the Entrepreneurial Venture, only because the professor was good. I didn't think it would be relevant, and it is my day in and day out. So understand finance. The second is you have to be a bit of an anthropologist. You have to be able to get on the ground and understand the context around you, and be very sensitive to the human dynamics that are at play, and not just sensitive to it, but it factors into decision making, ways to be effective there. And then the final thing, and this may be obvious, but I draw it out: you have to have empathy. What the work that we do is driven by people, and sometimes people in very difficult circumstances. And you have to let that touch you, because it drives you to continue doing the work.
Superb. In fact, empathy is something that post the pandemic, even corporate world is talking about. Words like empathy and respect have crept in to their vocabulary as well, and they are answerable to the stakeholders. So yes, thank you so much. Wonderful, thoughts. I'm going to hand over to the audience. So we have Megha from the Catalyst team who would like to ask you a question.
Great.
Could we have the spotlight on Megha, please?
Hi, Kate. It was lovely hearing you, and you have really given a lot of advices. I'm going to follow all of them. So my question to you is, considering the gap in identifying the right skills and better employment, what advice would you give to today's women who are in early career to ensure that they do not drop from their career path?
Well, I was going to say that we could write a book about this, but so many people have much better than I'll come up with. So, one thing I think, and this is just one part of the equation, is finding employers who are understanding of multiple facets of your life. When I look at my friends, I'm at a stage where our kids are going to college. We have gone through this path. And when I look at the friends of mine, even those from business school, who decided when they were juggling their family that was more than they wanted to do, and stepped away from their careers, often it had to do with employers who were not flexible, and who looked very attractive for various reasons, but made it hard to navigate through that period. Whereas others who had more understanding employers were able to recognize that that women are important contributors. Family people were very important contributors, and they would make allowances as needed and be rewarded for all of this talent that was then available to them. And it certainly, I feel like I benefited in my career by having both managers and organizations that appreciated the fact that there was more going on in my life.
Superb, extremely comprehensive. We have one final question from Pranjali. So could we have the spotlight on Pranjali, please?
Yes. Thank you, Kate. First of all, you covered a lot of things and we got a lot of insights. My question to you is, you worked in diverse cultures and different countries. So what, according to you, are some of the ways to develop global leaders?
Oh, that is a great question. And that is not something that I have any definitive answers on. I'm always learning. And I'll start with another trait, and that is humility. Um, every time I begin working in a new context, whether it is India or Africa or Latin America, I try to learn from my peers and the leaders around what is effective there. I am a stereotypical, very direct American. That doesn't work in every context. And so I think this is good advice for life in general. I look to people who I find are working very effectively, and I ask them to mentor me, to tutor me. What do you advise? I don't come in assuming I have answers. To use a Buddhist notion, I come in with a beginner's mind. And that is how, and I encourage, now that I'm at a stage of my life that I have leaders who are reporting to me, I encourage them to do the same thing. Begin with questions. Don't begin with your assertions.
Superb. Thank you. And on that note, we've reached the end of our session. Thank you, Kate. It's been wonderful hearing your views on impact investing and the examples that you've given. Our audience will benefit tremendously from it. And on that note, thank you. And a big thank you to our listeners for joining us today. And we look forward to connecting with you again in the month of December with our next speaker. So on that note, Kate, thank you so much. Really appreciate it and enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.